So this week, I've focused a lot on what the foundations of the U.S. public school system is. And titled my presentation, Should We Leave Children Behind? Because I focused on the reading about Thomas Jefferson and his public school system, where everyone gets 2 years of schooling, and if they excel, if they're the best of class, like the top third move on, and then eventually only a portion of them, and they keep kind of whittling them down until they're down to just the elite, like, you know, who gets free schooling, versus anyone else who wants to keep being schooled but has to pay for it. And so I just got really thinking about that concept of having to kind of whittle down and find the best minds, but still make sure everyone gets some basic level of education. So that's where a lot of my thought process was this week. So just to kick things off, my first question, and the question I'll be focusing the most on, is the No Child Left Behind program making the public school system better or worse? And a little disclaimer here, I thought the No Child Left Behind program was something I just heard about. I thought it was this idea that children were no longer allowed to be held back unless parents requested for it. That's what I was told in middle school. That actually had a serious impact on my motivation in middle school. So I've come to learn that even in California and everywhere else, it's not a thing. Like, the No Child Left Behind program isn't a thing, but it's not that. What it really is a program that shoots to allow children of minorities and other, lesser opportunity groups the opportunity to excel in school. And so it's just programs that help hopefully boost the supplies they get, the attention they get, and there's lots of little things that go into it. And so it did still kind of fit the bill, though, what I was thinking of, is the U.S. school system still based in the same principles as it was back in its founding? Are we in the same foundation? And I've kind of turned my answer to be yes. I believe that we still are shooting for the same principles. So another slide, I think the foundations still are equal opportunity for everyone, boosting the understanding of the common man, especially so that they can govern themselves, and then also just providing opportunity for everyone to excel. I think that's kind of relevant in the idea of the pursuit of happiness, this idea that we all have at least the opportunity afforded us to excel. So, the reason I think that the U.S. public school system still are reflecting these foundations is the No Child Left Behind Act is trying to boost the understanding of the common man, and specifically, targeting these people who maybe are getting left behind because we're not focusing on them. I realize that there's some issues, I don't want to get political with this, but there's some people who have, cons about this, who think that the No Child Left Behind program doesn't put enough emphasis on the right locations and doesn't provide enough support for those minority students. There are those who just feel like we don't need to focus on them, that we should just focus on everyone as a whole. And many other, cons to it. But in general, I think the idea behind it reflects this foundation that we want everyone to receive a good education and a base level of education. Which honestly, like I said, all my questions kind of melded together. My second question was, why don't more students get the option to choose the classes that are most interested in public schools? Well, the reason I came to is because we want everyone to have this base level of common education so that people are smart enough to govern themselves and not depend on others for knowledge. Especially, back before the days of the internet and mass spread technology and information, it was super important that people got their own education and knew things for themselves so that they could be educated when it came to governing themselves. And so that's where I think a lot of our nation comes from. So sorry, I hope I'm not rambling, because I just feel like all these ideas are very connected. But basically my final conclusion on the No Child Left Behind program is, I think the idea behind it is good. I think it's very important to make sure that we're providing an education for everybody. But the issue with all these programs, I think, will always be, there's no way to force teachers to teach better. There's no way to make them, force them to be more aware of minority students. The No Child Left Behind program, part of it is extra testing, extra assessment, so that teachers can see which children are struggling and focus on them more. And I think it's a great little tool and implementation that the U.S. has put in, but at the end of the day, that's not going to force the teacher to be better equipped to help these students that are struggling. It's just pushing on this idea and kind of pushing teachers in that direction. So ultimately, I think it comes down to us. As teachers, we need to be prepared to do our part, to really make sure that we're making sure no child gets left behind. Without some act or some law over our head pushing that. We just need to do it for the sake and love of teaching and for the sake and love of the foundations of what the American school system has been established on. So just to wrap it up, that was my first question. I'll run through it one more time. My second question was, why don't more students get the option to choose the classes that most interest them in public schools? And my third question was, what foundations are public schools built on that I should adopt or at the least understand to further the growth of U.S. schools? So thank you for listening to my presentation.